Night had settled hard and sharp on the outskirts of Granite Creek, Colorado. Snow hammered against the neon-lit glass of Ray's diner, blurring the world outside into a swirl of ghostly white. Inside, the warmth was brittle as the fluorescent hum above the counter and the forced laughter from the last row of tables. Anna Foster moved through the din, carrying a pot of coffee in one hand, the limp in her left leg barely slowing her practiced stride. She was a fixture here, the quiet waitress, always on time, always neat, always silent. Few noticed the scars along her wrist when she refilled their mugs. Fewer still wondered how someone so careful could wear those lines, as if they had been carved by fire. Tonight, the diner was busier than usual. A group of construction workers, rowdy from a long shift and too many pitchers, crowded the corner booth. Their voices cut through the soft jazz from the radio. Anna approached, professional, careful, eyes on her order pad. Then, in a flash, too quick for anyone to stop, a drunken hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Fingers curled around the faded sleeve. The laughter grew mean. "Come on, show us what you're hiding under there." Someone whistled, another fumbled for their phone, the camera lens greedy for humiliation. Anna tried to pull back, but the grip tightened. In a single motion, the sleeve was yanked up. The scar, raw and unmistakable, glared under the diner's lights. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the room erupted, phones up, a flash, a shriek of laughter. A mug slipped, crashed, shattered across the linoleum. The sound was almost a relief. Anna didn't flinch, didn't cry out. She stood frozen, gaze fixed somewhere behind the counter. Time dilated. The world watched, judged, recorded, and then a chair scraped back. An older man, alone at the window, rose. His voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the noise with something sharper than anger, colder than the snow outside. "That's the hand that once pulled soldiers out of burning metal," he said. "Show some respect." A hush. Laughter died. Even the construction worker let go, suddenly aware of something heavier in the air. Anna blinked, slowly lowered her arm. She bent, gathered the broken mug in trembling hands, and slipped behind the counter, vanishing into the kitchen's half-dark. Beneath the register, hidden from view, a medallion caught the light for just a second. Anna's fingers found it by memory, tracing the worn edge. Her hand trembled, just a little, before she tucked it away. Out of sight, out of story. For now. If you've ever seen courage go unrecognized, or witnessed a quiet act of strength, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe stories like Anna's deserve to be heard, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us. This is only the beginning. Outside, the storm thickened, erasing the world with each new gust. Anna Foster stepped into the snow's hush, the diner's laughter and sharp light falling away behind her. Her breath frosted the air. No one walked these streets after midnight except Anna. Her shift always ended last, and she preferred the solitude. There was a peace in the way the snow muted everything, made even her limp seem softer, less obvious to eyes that were never kind. Anna's apartment was barely more than a single room above a shuttered antique store. Each step up the narrow staircase squeaked under her weight. The door opened into stillness, and the kind of cold that seeps into bones left too long unattended. She clicked on the lamp by the window. Its light found little to illuminate. A sagging armchair, a coat rack with only uniforms from jobs past, a small kitchenette. On the shelf above her bed, a battered shadow box waited. Inside, a military medallion, dulled but intact, lay beside a stack of envelopes yellowed with time, and a silver dog tag so old Its letters were almost worn smooth. Anna slipped out of her work shoes, wincing as she flexed her ankle. She crossed to the box, opening it with the same careful hands that once bandaged wounds and steadied IV lines. From the pile, she pulled an envelope stamped "Return to Sender." The birthday card inside was untouched, except for a red mark. Recipient deceased. Anna traced the name. A fellow medic gone. Another thread to her past, snapped and drifting. She sat, silent, at the edge of her bed, the dog tag warm from her palm. Anna's thumb followed the groove of each engraved letter. The room seemed to contract around her, memory crowding out the quiet. It always started the same way, soundless at first. The thumping of rotors, the metallic taste of fear. A flash, Afghanistan, heat and chaos, a helicopter spinning, dirt and flame. Anna's hands, bare and bleeding, scrabbling through twisted metal for a Marine she didn't know by name. The world narrowed to the press of blood, the weight of a man's body, the distant gunfire she tried to ignore. She remembered the look in his eyes, startled, pleading, then grateful. She hauled him, somehow, through the inferno, not pausing even as shrapnel tore her sleeve and fire kissed her skin. Memory never lingered on the aftermath. It never showed the medals, the forms, the slow walk down a hospital corridor. It always stopped with the rescue. After, everything went gray. Anna was discharged before her wounds fully healed. The Air Force said honorable and handed her a stack of papers and a half-empty duffel bag. She returned stateside in winter, stepping off a bus into a world where no one waited. Her mother's funeral came and went, a gathering of distant cousins, cold hands, the priest's words drifting up with the smoke from the crematorium. Anna stood alone, uniformed and unreadable, as people whispered about the scar on her neck and the silence that seemed to follow her. In the weeks that followed, Anna wandered from place to place, the world unfamiliar and sharp. She filled out job applications with practiced neatness. No mention of Afghanistan, no mention of the medals tucked away in her bag. Eventually, a help wanted sign in the window of Ray's diner drew her in. The owner, Ray himself, didn't ask many questions. He needed a reliable waitress, not a story. Anna took the job, grateful for the routine. She learned quickly to fade into the scenery. Most customers barely glanced her way, lost in their own conversations, coffee, and phone screens. Those who did notice rarely saw past the limp or the faint lines peeking from under her cuffs. The few who lingered in the mornings, old men, early shift workers, nodded at her professionalism. The way she remembered orders, never spilled a drink, never raised her voice. But most just gossiped quietly or looked away, uncertain if pity or discomfort was the right response. Still, Anna never made mistakes. She found comfort in the repetition, scraping plates, pouring coffee, wiping down tables until every surface shone. Each night, she let the quiet routine wash away the noise of the world outside. But not everyone avoided her. Some nights, a little girl named Emma came to the diner with her father. Emma was all freckles and soft curiosity, her eyes wide as she watched Anna work. She never looked at the scars. Once, while waiting for her chocolate milk, Emma asked, "Why do you always wear long sleeves, even when it's hot?" Anna smiled, a rare flicker of warmth. "Because sometimes, old stories like to hide. Maybe one day, they'll be ready to come out." Emma nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went back to her coloring book. In Emma's presence, the heaviness of Anna's days seemed to lift, if only for a moment. The child didn't know the right questions to ask, and maybe that was a gift. Sometimes, As Anna watched Emma and her father laugh over pancakes, she wondered what it was like to belong so simply to a place. To be seen only for the kindness in your smile, not the marks on your skin or the burdens you carried in silence. Outside, the storm moved on, leaving only the hush of falling snow. Anna set the shadow box back in its place, switched off the lamp, and lay down to the lullaby of distant wind. Tomorrow, she would wake before dawn. The diner would fill with voices again, and Anna Foster would go on, quietly, invisibly, until someone, someday, looked deeper than the scars. The storm had passed, but the chill lingered in the bones of Granite Creek. With dawn, the world outside Anna's window transformed. Snowbanks glowed blue in the early light, untouched except for a single path worn by her footsteps. The diner opened before sunrise, its sign flickering to life against a slate sky. Inside, Anna Foster prepared for another day. The ritual was as familiar as breathing. She scrubbed the counters, lined up coffee mugs, and set the radio to a station that played old jazz at low volume. For a little while, before the first customers drifted in, the world was still. Safe. But peace, Anna knew, never lasted long. That morning, the construction crew returned, noisier than ever, their laughter scraping the quiet into something jagged. They filled the corner booth, boots stomping, voices rising with every refill. Anna worked with the same careful precision, smiling softly at regulars, pouring coffee, clearing plates. The routine steadied her hands, yet their jeers became harder to ignore. The leader of the group, a burly man with a voice that carried, started in as soon as she approached. "Hey, Scarface! Didn't think you'd show your mug after last night," he called, waving his phone in her direction. Anna paused only for a second, then kept moving, offering a polite, practiced smile as she refilled their cups. But the phone stayed up, cameras tracking her every move. The man's friend nudged him, stage whispering, "Let's go viral with Scarface's secret, huh?" The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Anna felt her breath catch, but she did not let it show. The humiliation was public now, recorded, shared, turned into something people would watch and laugh at later. She retreated to the counter, her hands trembling only slightly as she grabbed the coffee pot. Across the diner, Emma watched everything. The little girl sat with her father at a booth by the window, a coloring book open in front of her. She had been giggling about syrup and pancakes, but now her small face had grown serious. After Anna brought their food, Emma waited until her father was distracted by his phone. She tugged at Anna's apron, voice gentle. "Does it hurt when people look at you that way?" she asked, searching Anna's face for something beyond the scars. Anna knelt to meet Emma's gaze, eyes kind despite the fatigue in her posture. Her answer came softly, honest in its simplicity. "It hurts more to be forgotten," Anna said. "People stop seeing you after a while, except for the parts they don't understand." Emma seemed to consider this, nodding as if Anna had given her the only answer that made sense. "I'm glad I see you," Emma whispered. Anna smiled, a small, real thing, and for a moment, the pain faded. But the tension in the diner didn't. Willis, the older man who had spoken up the night before, sat at his usual booth with a black coffee and a folded newspaper. He watched the construction crew through narrowed eyes, silent but intent. His gaze lingered on Anna, tracking her movements, noticing the little pauses and careful avoidance of the men's table. When his breakfast was done, Willis scribbled something on the back of his bill, a phone number perhaps, or a memory, no one could tell. He left it tucked under the edge of his plate, paid in cash, and nodded at Anna on his way out. His eyes held something unspoken, a promise or a warning. Later, as the lunch rush peaked, Anna's routine faltered for just a moment. She dropped a stack of napkins at a table near the door. As she bent to pick them up, her sleeve rode up, exposing a faded tattoo on the inside of her wrist, a caduceus entwined with a pair of wings, the insignia of a military medic. The mark was old, ink blurred, but unmistakable to those who knew. Willis, on his way out, paused. His eyes flicked to the tattoo, then to Anna's face. He said nothing, but outside he made a brief, tense phone call, his voice low and urgent. No one in the diner noticed, except perhaps Anna herself, who watched him through the window until he was gone. That night, after the last plate was washed and the lights dimmed, Anna sat alone at the counter. She reached under the register and pulled out the medallion, its metal cool in her palm. It was a simple thing, engraved with her unit, the year, a faded inscription almost invisible now. She turned it over and over, the weight a comfort and a burden. From her purse, she took a stack of old letters. Some bore her handwriting, addresses in distant states or overseas. Many were stamped undeliverable or recipient deceased. She read the names, soldiers she had served with, some saved, some lost. Each envelope was a piece of her past, a thread connecting her to a world no one in Granite Creek could imagine. Anna returned the medallion to its hiding place. She stared out at the snowy street, the lights of the diner flickering in the glass. Somewhere, she knew, there were others like her, waiting to be seen, waiting for someone to remember the stories behind the scars. In the days that followed, the undercurrent of unease in the diner only grew stronger. The construction crew's antics became almost ritual, as if humiliation was now part of their meal. Their laughter echoed long after they left, carried on the wind that rattled the windows at closing time. One afternoon, Anna stood in the kitchen doorway, listening to the murmur of voices through the pass window. A co-worker, Jody, the line cook, glanced up and caught Anna's eye. Jody didn't ask questions, didn't press. She just gave a subtle nod, an unspoken sign of solidarity. Anna appreciated it more than words, yet even Jody couldn't shield her from the world outside. The video from that first night had found its way onto social media, a short, grainy clip of Anna's scar exposed under the harsh diner lights. The comments stung, but Anna refused to read them after the first few lines. She looks like a monster. What happened to her? Bet she deserved it. There was no context, no story, just a parade of strangers, all eager to judge what they didn't understand. Anna's world shrank further. She moved through her days like a ghost, her focus narrowing to the smallest details, how the napkins were folded, the precise angle of a fork beside a plate, the comforting repetition of a polished counter. Each night she returned to her apartment, clutching her bag to her chest, and sat in the pool of lamplight by the window, unable to sleep. Her only solace was in the ritual of remembering. On her kitchen table, the pile of letters grew. She tried again and again to find living threads, reaching out to old squad mates, former medics, anyone who might still carry a piece of the past. Some answered, briefly and formally. Most never wrote back. Too many came stamped, "No longer at this address," or worse, "Deceased." The silence was a wound that refused to close. The medallion under the diner counter became her anchor. She began to visit it more often, taking a moment between shifts to trace the edges, to remember the feeling of being useful, of being needed, even if only for a moment. The regulars, The quiet men and women who filled the diner's booths at dawn and dusk noticed the shift in Anna's energy. She moved with less assurance, her hands sometimes shaking as she poured coffee or carried a tray. But still, she did not falter. Not even when the crew's leader started telling stories about her, weaving tall tales for the entertainment of his friends. "I heard she's on the run," he'd say. "Bet those scars are from a prison fight." Laughter erupted, and Anna kept moving, eyes fixed ahead, as if she could will herself invisible. Emma, the little girl, continued to watch. She noticed things that others missed, the way Anna always made sure she had extra whipped cream on her hot chocolate, or how she took an extra moment to wipe away syrup from the table before Emma and her father sat down. One night, Emma's father caught her staring at Anna's wrist, eyes wide and thoughtful. "Why are you looking at her like that?" he whispered. Emma just shook her head, clutching her crayon. "She's brave," she said quietly, as if bravery was something you could see on the surface of skin. Anna heard the words, and they lingered. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of the diner shift. Was it possible that someone could see past the scars? Was there room, even now, for hope? Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the footprints on the sidewalk. Inside, Anna moved among the tables, silent, steady, each step forward a small act of defiance, each smile a tiny rebellion against the darkness that threatened to swallow her. And in a small town where memory was short and judgment long, a story waited beneath the surface. One scar, one glance, one silent act at a time. Morning arrived colder than before. The wind sculpted hard drifts against the diner's windows, and clouds hung low and gray, threatening another storm. Anna arrived early as always, letting herself in before the sun had burned away the last of the streetlights. She moved through her opening tasks with silent discipline, wiping down the booths, flipping chairs off the tables, making sure every spoon gleamed and every sugar shaker was full. It was another day, or so it seemed. But even before the open sign glowed in the window, Anna sensed a difference. There was an electricity in the air, nerves on edge, a quiet expectancy that pressed into her shoulders. By 7, the booths began to fill, but not with the usual crowd. Today, the customers came in pairs and small groups, each one older, some wearing faded caps, some with pins on their collars, some with posture too straight for their age. Willis was among the first to arrive. He took his seat in the same booth by the window, but he didn't bring a newspaper this time. Instead, he sat with his hands folded, watching the room with a soldier's alertness, as if waiting for a signal. Anna caught his eye for a brief moment, but he said nothing. Behind him, more veterans arrived. They filled the diner slowly, methodically, and with an unspoken purpose. The regulars noticed. Jody, in the kitchen, peered out the pass window and gave Anna a look. Something's up. Even the construction crew seemed subdued as they claimed their usual corner. Their leader's bravado had shrunk. His eyes darted from one unfamiliar face to another. Anna kept her head down. She focused on orders, tickets, the steady grind of the coffee maker. But there was no hiding from what was coming. Every movement felt heavy, every word stuck to the roof of her mouth. As she delivered a plate of eggs to Willis, he caught her wrist. Not roughly, but gently, with the quiet certainty of someone who's made up his mind. He stood. The scrape of his chair silenced the room. Every conversation ceased. Forks hovered, coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Anna's breath caught. Willis did not let go. His voice, when it came, carried far, strong but low, anchored with memory. Years ago, in Helmand, Afghanistan, a medic risked everything for strangers, Willis began. She crawled through fire to pull a Marine out of a wrecked bird. Didn't even know his name. She disappeared before I could thank her. I never forgot. The room was utterly still. Anna stood as if rooted to the floor, the echo of that day roaring in her ears. Willis turned to her, hand still on her wrist. He gently lifted the sleeve of her uniform. For the first time in public, the faded tattoo was fully exposed. A pair of wings entwined around a caduceus, the mark of a combat medic. Anna didn't move. Her eyes met Willis's, recognition flaring between them, the kind that only two survivors can share. Willis's next words trembled, not with weakness, but with reverence. "You saved my life." A sound moved through the diner, something between a gasp and a sigh. Around the room, the other veterans rose, one by one. Some moved stiffly, some with tears in their eyes, but all stood tall. They turned to Anna, and in a gesture older than any medal or monument, they saluted her. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The sunlight caught on old campaign ribbons, on wedding bands, on hands held over hearts. Even the construction crew, those who had laughed the loudest, fell silent. One man looked away, ashamed. Another cleared his throat, unable to meet Anna's gaze. Anna stood, hands shaking. She did not cry. Instead, she met each veteran's eyes in turn, nodding once. Acknowledgement, gratitude, the kind of connection built only in the hardest places on earth. Then something shifted at the far end of the room. Emma, the little girl, slipped from her father's side and ran across the diner, arms flung wide. She wrapped herself around Anna's waist, squeezing tight. "You're my hero," she whispered, voice trembling with sincerity. Anna bent down, arms closing around Emma, the first real embrace she'd allowed herself in years. From behind the counter, the manager emerged, his face softer than usual. He pressed something small and metallic into Anna's palm, the medallion she kept hidden, now gleaming in the light for all to see. "You've earned the rest of the shift off," he said quietly, "and maybe more than that." At first, the applause was hesitant, a single pair of hands clapping, uncertain. Then another joined in, then a third. Soon, the diner rang with genuine warmth, the kind that fills up the cracks left by loneliness. Anna stood in the center of it all, not hidden, not invisible, but seen. The applause rolled through the diner, at first awkward, then growing stronger, louder, fuller, until it filled every corner of the room. The sound was not for spectacle, nor was it for show. It was gratitude, distilled and unmistakable. And in its center, Anna Foster stood utterly still, her hands curled around the medallion, her cheeks flushed not with shame, but with something deeper, something like relief. Willis let his arm fall, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Around him, the other veterans formed a quiet ring. Some had come from neighboring towns, others from across the county. Many had their own scars, visible or hidden, but in this moment, all that mattered was the act of remembrance. Their salute was not just for Anna. It was for every medic, every lost friend, every moment when courage was the only answer. For the first time since she left Afghanistan, Anna felt the weight in her chest begin to lift, not disappear. Scars don't vanish in the light of a single morning, but soften, just enough to let something else in. The construction crew, silenced by the weight of what they'd witnessed, began to shuffle out. Their leader lingered at the door, uncertain. He turned, and for a heartbeat, his bravado was gone. In its place was a halting sincerity, an awkward hand raised halfway in apology. He said nothing. Sometimes there are no words that fit, but the message landed all the same. Customers, regulars, and strangers alike lined up to offer handshakes, thanks, and sometimes only a silent nod. A few veterans slipped Anna small tokens, a patch, a coin, a folded flag from a grandfather's chest. Emma's father, holding back tears, knelt beside his daughter and said quietly, "Thank you for showing my child what real bravery looks like." As the room settled, Anna's manager handed her a slip of paper, her shift covered, no questions asked. "Take all the time you need," he murmured, and Anna, for once, did not refuse. The morning bled into afternoon. The story, already captured on a few cell phones, began to ripple beyond the diner's walls. But for Anna, the world narrowed to the faces in front of her. She stood not as a symbol, but as a person whose pain had been acknowledged, whose service had finally been seen. The sunlight, streaming through frosted glass, caught the edge of Anna's medallion as she stepped outside for the first time in hours. She pressed it to her heart, breathing in the sharp air. In the parking lot, Willis waited, offering a steadying hand as she walked out beneath the pale Colorado sky. Inside, the diner returned to its gentle rhythm. Coffee poured, laughter resumed, the scent of fresh biscuits wafted from the kitchen. But something fundamental had changed. Granite Creek, for a moment, had remembered not just one veteran, but all those who walk among us with stories unspoken, courage unnoticed, and hearts far heavier than they let on. And Anna Foster, her story once hidden, now told, walked home not lighter, but less alone. By evening, the news had begun to travel, first as a whisper among the town's regulars, then as a pulse through the digital veins of social media. The cell phone footage, shaky and unpolished, had already been posted to local community boards. It was a video less about spectacle and more about revelation. A woman's tattoo, a row of saluting veterans, and the hush of a room that finally understood. Within 24 hours, Anna Foster's story, once hidden under a diner's harsh lights, had spread well beyond Granite Creek. People who had never set foot in the small Colorado town messaged the diner's Facebook page, sharing words of gratitude and recognition. Some spoke of their own parents or siblings who had served. Others simply wrote, "Thank you for seeing her." Anna returned to work the next morning, half expecting the world to snap back into its old, indifferent pattern. Instead, she found the diner changed in quiet but unmistakable ways. The air felt lighter, as if judgment had been replaced by a gentler curiosity. The regulars watched her not with pity, but with a respect that needed no words. Before noon, a couple entered, a man in a navy jacket, his wife holding a worn photograph. They asked to meet Anna, pressing her hands between theirs, eyes shining. "Our son served in Helmand," the woman said. "He never made it home, but your courage makes us proud for him." Anna, unused to praise, nodded softly, squeezing their hands in return. In the days that followed, the diner became a pilgrimage site for veterans and their families. Old friends found each other by accident, reconnecting over plates of eggs and steaming mugs of coffee. They brought patches, medals, and black and white photographs, leaving them as offerings at the booth where Willis liked to sit. Sometimes, Anna would listen to their stories, the names of distant cities, the faces of comrades lost and found. She never interrupted, but she always remembered. The construction crew returned, noticeably subdued. Their leader approached Anna at the start of his shift, his hat in his hands. "We were wrong," he admitted, voice barely more than a whisper. "We didn't see you. We didn't know." The words cost him, but Anna only nodded, accepting his awkward apology. She watched as the crew organized a fundraiser for wounded veterans, hosting it right there in the diner's parking lot. For once, their laughter was genuine, fueled by generosity instead of bravado. One afternoon, between lunch and dinner, Anna did something she never imagined. She took the medallion from her pocket and placed it inside a small frame, tucking it onto a shelf near the window. There was no plaque, no announcement, just a quiet gesture, a silent acknowledgement of everything the medal represented and of everything it couldn't possibly capture. Anna didn't want a shrine. She only wanted to remind herself, and anyone who cared to notice, that some stories are worth carrying in the open. Emma, always observant, brought Anna a drawing. It showed a woman with a kind smile standing tall in front of a diner, surrounded by tiny hearts and stars. In crayon letters, the caption read, "My hero is kind and brave." Anna knelt to thank Emma, her voice thick, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. As autumn waned and snow returned to Granite Creek, the diner transformed. Word of mouth traveled far. Veterans from neighboring counties began to meet there, sharing their own scars, their own small victories. Some came simply to sit, comfortable in the presence of those who understood. Others returned regularly, drawn by the sense of belonging that had quietly blossomed. There was no banner, no official designation. But Ray's Diner, with its flickering neon sign and scratched vinyl booths, had become something rare, a sanctuary, a place where service was seen, wounds were honored, and the weight of memory was made lighter, if only by the company of others. And for Anna, the space between isolation and acceptance narrowed with each passing day. She was still quiet, still careful. But now, when she moved through the diner, her steps were steadier, her smile less guarded, as if each act of kindness, each story shared, each thank you spoken, was building a bridge back to the part of herself she thought she'd lost forever. As weeks passed, the transformation of Ray's Diner became part of Granite Creek's quiet folklore. Regulars began referring to Anna's corner as Anna's Table, and the nickname stuck. The framed medallion by the window drew curious glances, but those who understood nodded in silent respect. Veterans who once drove past Granite Creek began making deliberate detours, each visit another thread in a tapestry of belonging. Anna's routine shifted. She started arriving a little earlier, staying a little later. Sometimes, after the last customer left and Jody had finished closing the kitchen, Anna lingered at the medallion's frame, fingertips resting lightly on the glass. She'd glance out into the night, her breath fogging the pain, and remember the hands she'd held, the voices she'd soothed, the names she'd written and rewritten on letters never sent. The sense of community deepened. The fundraiser organized by the construction crew surpassed everyone's expectations, drawing a crowd from neighboring towns. Local news came to cover the event, but the camera never caught Anna's face directly. Instead, it focused on a mural that had appeared almost overnight on the diner's back wall, a silhouette of a medic kneeling beside a wounded soldier, painted in the muted greens and browns of old uniforms. Underneath, a line in careful script: "We serve in silence until someone remembers." Emma became a regular fixture at the diner, sometimes drawing, sometimes reading, but always keeping Anna company. The little girl's innocent questions reminded Anna of a world beyond wounds, a world where healing could begin, not just for her, but for everyone who found their way to the diner. Inspired by what had happened, Anna found herself writing letters again. Not the hesitant, formal notes of her first month's home, but genuine messages to families of those she'd served with, sometimes with memories, sometimes with gratitude, sometimes simply to say, they are not forgotten. In each envelope, she enclosed a photograph of the mural, a small symbol that their stories lived on in the hearts of strangers. Winter deepened. The snow, once a curtain isolating Anna from the world, now seemed to soften the landscape, blanketing Granite Creek in a peace she'd once thought out of reach. From her seat at the window, Anna would watch veterans old and young arrive, gathering in quiet clusters to share coffee and remembrance. Each gathering was different, but all were bound by the shared language of sacrifice, survival, and silent strength. On the anniversary of the day Willis stood and told the diner Anna's story, a gentle celebration took place. No speeches, no grand gestures, just a single table set with an empty chair, a plate of food, a small candle, and the medallion gleaming in the sun. Anna, invited to sit, did so with a humility that was as much part of her as the scars she bore. As dusk fell, the mural on the back wall caught the last gold light of the day. Anna stood before it, tracing the painted lines with her eyes. She whispered names, a quiet roll call of those who had been lost and those who had come home. She didn't ask for recognition, nor did she need it. What mattered was the community, the belonging, the understanding that had bloomed from a single moment of courage. For the first time, Anna allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by wounds, but by connection. She looked around at the faces in the diner, Emma, Willis, the construction crew, veterans she'd never met, and realized she was no longer alone. A gentle voiceover closes the story, inviting viewers to reflect. Sometimes, the bravest act is not in the battles fought, but in the stories shared, quietly, gently, among those willing to listen. If you know a silent hero, or if you've been changed by the kindness of a stranger, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe every story of courage deserves a home, subscribe and stay with us. There are still so many journeys left to tell. Anna Foster, once invisible, had become the heart of a community, a living reminder that dignity, gratitude, and hope could thrive even in the most unlikely places. And in the hush of a snowy evening, beneath the mural and the medallion's gentle gleam, her story lived on, one connection at a time.